Okay, again, welcome everyone. We're so happy that you're here today, and we are very, very lucky to have our wonderful tour guide and interpreter and park ranger who's here with us today, Tracy Kosinski, and she is at the Hearst, she's actually at Hearst Castle, and she'll be giving us a live tour of Hearst Castle and the gardens. And we are so happy to have her here with the County of San Luis Obispo Public Library today. So thank you for joining us. And again, if you have any questions or would like to interact, please do so through the chat. Your microphones will be turned off during the program. Thank you. Over to you, Tracy.
All right. Well, thank you, Margaret, for having us. That sounds like a great deal with the Julia Morgan book by Victoria Kastner. I'm about halfway through, and it's pretty phenomenal. It really gives an intimate portrayal of the architect of Hearst Castle. So if you do get that opportunity to get your book, you should take it. Thank you for having me again. My name is Tracy. I want to welcome you to Hearst Castle. We are a California State Park. We have been a California State Park for over 60 years. This is the former home of William Randolph Hearst. Hearst would hire Julia Morgan to build his, I like to call it his dream house, because anything he thought of that he desired, he oftentimes tried to get built or accomplish here. And Julia Morgan is California's first licensed woman architect. So we have a special story. Our story today actually is focused on the gardens. It's a garden tour. And the gardens of Hearst Castle then and now. The gardens of Hearst Castle, both then and now. So our tour is going to take us around all the blooms. We're going to see how it was laid out in a Renaissance garden style. We're going to see the Mediterranean plants that are within the gardens. We're going to talk about the changes that happened over the time period of building. We will meet staff, both from Hearst Day and from today. And we will get to experience all the beautiful summer blooms that are happening right now. And it's really hard to believe that before 1920, all of this wasn't here, and it looked a little bit more like the landscape we see out before us. So we can see into North San Luis Obispo County. We can see the Santa Lucia Mountains. We have our golden rolling hills dotted with oak trees and stone, right? So before 1920, let's see, I'm going to share an image with you. Now, you'll have to be patient. When I share images, we do get a delay in a black screen a little bit, and then the image comes up. One of the head gardeners, Nigel Keep, he worked from 1922 to 1947. And he started out as an arborist and a tree planter, went on to become a head gardener a little later in his career here at Hearst Castle. But he had said in an interview, I took bare ground and rocks and rattlesnakes, and I made a beautiful place. And this beautiful place, oftentimes well, the designer is Julia Morgan, the architect, as well as the landscape designer. And the inspiration for the gardens are places like Villa d'Este in Italy and Villa de Farnese. So different villas, Italian villas, and places in Spain, like the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, or the mosque or Mezquita in Cordoba, Spain. These are all, those two places are southern Spain, Andalusia, also places like Sevilla. So we're going to explore how the gardens reflect European gardens, specifically Italian Renaissance and Mediterranean. So we see Nigel Keep on the left. He worked for Hearst for quite a long time. A long career here. He was one of his favorite gardeners. Hearst and Morgan oftentimes had trouble finding a gardener that, well, he liked. They went through 6 different head gardeners between 1921 and 1937, and they tended to be of 2 types: artistic but temperamental, or practical but unimaginative. But Nigel Keep seemed to be one of the best choices. And then on the right, we see an image of that bare ground and the rocks and the landscape with the start of a cottage. And this is the start of the cottage that will be named Casa del Monte, House of the Mountain. There are 3 cottages in total built between 1920 and 1924. They're all facing their views. They're laid out appropriately on the hilltop to either face the ocean, the sunset, or the mountains. And we see on this historic photo that Julia Morgan would kind of finish a roof line to get an idea. And here's the cottage today. You can kind of see the edge of it in one corner, and then you can see the mountains beyond. Some nice climbing roses up the palm tree. So a Renaissance garden, features of a Renaissance garden will be geometric flower beds and more geometry provided by these boxwood hedges that we see in the scene, symmetry, statuary of classical sculptures and elements from Greece and Rome, stone busts, column, copies of Greek and Roman statues. We're going to focus on the gardens around the cottages today, but we're going to see how it relates with and is intertwined with Casa Grande, which is the formal name for Hearst Castle. We're going to see how it's all laid out to be a harmonious whole, and how these pathways will take us around to different places throughout the Renaissance style gardens. So the gardens as a whole are all connected, but within the gardens, you'll come upon different features that are meant to be looked at as a component. So this area, we'll see these little areas, these little components throughout the garden that are meant to be looked at like a feature that you come upon. So this is an ancient Roman marble sarcophagus around 1,800 years old. And this was commonly seen, something like this, a Roman antiquity in an Italian Renaissance garden, along with columns. And we see that the columns are symmetrically placed on either side of the sarcophagus. And I'm going to back it up a little bit here so that we can see how the staircase cascades down on either side. I hope you can see this okay. The light is a little harsh, being 1:30 mid-afternoon. Another part of Italian Renaissance gardens are wide terraces, which we will see in a little bit. We were just overlooking a wide terrace, actually. Hearst would get lots of ideas from books or even from his very own travels. This picture taken with Marion Davies, it'll be coming up in just a moment. They're actually in Germany in this picture. Marion Davies is his girlfriend and companion partner. She was a famous actress, one of MGM's top actresses and comedians in the 20s and 30s. But Hearst was no stranger to travel. Hearst was born in 1863. By the time he's 10 in 1873, he joins his mother for the Grand European Tour. And they spend a year and a half traveling around Europe. And as he gets older, he's also he's summering in Europe. How nice would that be, right? And he's seeing castles and cathedrals and gardens at different Italian villas, ancient ruins. And his travels and his love of art and his love of culture would influence the hilltop creation that he asks Julia Morgan to design for him. They call it La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. And in 1926, William Randolph Hearst will take a trip to Europe And after the trip, he'll write to Julia Morgan, in comparing our place here with the Italian villas, I find that the main advantage of the Italian villas have over us are in the matter of wide terraces. So by 1926, we start to see some change happening in the gardens. And the gardens had been quite simple. They were a little more informal, but he is going to ask his architect to widen the gardens, formalize the walkways, and where they're going to bring in more flowering plants and geometry. And we're going to take a walk down the Esplanade, past a copy, well, it's a marble statue, about 100 years old, of the Roman god Mercury. On another trip to Europe later in the 30s, Hearst would write to his architect about fountains and water features. One thing that San Simeon really needs is fountains which fount. I mean, really fount, he said. And he thought in a dry land that having an element of water, fountain features, would double its charm and beauty. This fountain with lions is in the back courtyard of the cottage called Casa del Sol, House of the Sun. I'm going to turn us around over here. Casa del Sol has more of a Spanish theme. The three cottages in general were inspired by the Italian Renaissance. They were quite symmetrical. A lot of the detail was contained around the windows and the doors. And oftentimes their walls could be bare. However, these do have climbing bougainvillea. And bougainvillea is a type of plant that would be in the category of Mediterranean plants. So early on, we had more of a Spanish theme where the color was provided not by the flowers, but by the tiles. And a Spanish garden might not need a lot of water. So instead of having those flowers, we're having the colored tiles. There's a lot of greenery. There's still a lot of boxwood hedges. The Spanish gardens, which are inspired by the Moors coming from Persia, they're bringing geometric designs. So if we say that this house has a Spanish theme and a Spanish influence with a Moorish influence, there's geometric designs in the window screens and the towers. There's also Persian tiles right here under the chimney. So let's take a break from our Mediterranean garden design and go back to let's take a break from our Renaissance design inspired by the Italian villas and go back to the Spanish design and some kind of Mediterranean type plants. Palm trees are a Mediterranean plant. And even these plants have symbolism. So the palms that were planted along the Esplanade in the 1920s may have been about 10 to 15 feet tall when they were planted. And they've grown to over 70 feet tall today. Other types of Mediterranean plants would be Italian stone pine, pomegranates, orange, oaks, cypress, We saw the bougainvillea with the fuchsia flowers, or actually they're actually still the leaves. It's not really a flower petal on the bougainvillea. It's more of a leaf. But there's going to be a lot of Mediterranean type plants off of the Neptune terrace. So I mentioned that in the Spanish gardens with Mediterranean plants, you might not have a lot of flowers, but you do have a lot of color, and that's coming in through the tiles. So here we are. We've got our wide terrace. First got widened terraces. So we're standing on the Neptune terrace. We see the colorful tiles underfoot. We see a whole tour group here in grand rooms. Underneath everyone's feet is 17 Neptune pool dressing rooms. And they're all overlooking the Neptune pool. It's a gorgeous day today. It's warm, but there's a nice breeze. Hope everyone's having a good day out there. We see the Italian cypress in front of us. And Italian cypress, they're oftentimes seen at cemeteries, in addition to their Italian villas, but their symbolism is associated with the underworld and death. So there's a lot of Greek and Roman mythology within the art and the design here at Hearst Castle. We're looking out over the Neptune pool. So you might think of the underworld. And that's where Persephone, she is associated with the pomegranate. Persephone would be carried off to the underworld, and she would come back once a year to represent spring and fertility. Just beyond the colonnade of the Neptune pool, so Neptune is named after the ancient Roman god of the ocean, but just beyond the colonnade are actually a row of pomegranate trees. So it's a Mediterranean plant. And then in lining this area over here, and again beyond, is a orange grove. So an orange grove is another type of Mediterranean plant. A lot of the forest beyond the pool is also planted by people like Nigel Keep. He was a tree planter. So we have Canary Island date palms. Palms are another Mediterranean plant. There's Italian stone palms. Palms actually are, we have several types here, but they're associated with military victory and the goddess Nike with mythology, but also within Christianity, the palms are associated with Christ and martyrs' victory over death. And right behind me, I'm going to swivel us around. We have one of the oldest oak trees at Hearst Castle. Let me fix my tripod here. It's pretty large here. This is native to California, even though many oaks are found around the Mediterranean. This particular coastal live oak is native to California, and Hearst would try to preserve the trees really at any cost. He didn't want to cut down the oak trees. He did love them. He spent his whole life coming to this area of the Central Coast, being from San Francisco, but his family owned the ranch here. And he would come down here as a child, and he would go camping and horseback riding, and assuming he was climbing these oak trees as well before any of this was built. And he just loved the California landscape. So when they are building the cottages and the main house, Casa Grande, they are keeping in mind that the preservation of the oak trees. This one's thought to be about 300 years old. But when there was a place that he wanted to build, and there was an oak tree there, they would move it. They actually moved 4 of them. There is out of the 4, there is one that's still alive. It's right outside the theater. The growth of the oaks once they're moved is a bit stunted. One of them recently passed away and was cut down. But this is the length that they would take to go through to preserve the oaks. So we're in one of my favorite parts of the garden right now. We're in between House of the Mountain and House of the Sea. And we're just looking down this pathway right here. It's filled with petunias and rose standards, which is a rose where it's made to look like it's almost like a tree. You can see how the base is really tall, and then you've got the circular part of the rose on top. There are about 130 different varieties here, and they're actually quite fragrant. This is one of my favorites right here. And the roses have tabs on them. And this is the General MacArthur rose. So you'll have to take a big breath, everyone, and just imagine. They're pretty fragrant. Then we can see just the tip of the bell tower overhead. But let's head down this area. This is a nice quiet area where you can hear the sound of the fountains. The bees are buzzing. The butterflies are flying. It's just a really nice area. Each cottage actually has a color scheme. So looking back at Casa del Monte, House of the Mountain, the color scheme is going to be orange and blue and pink. Actually, it's blue, light yellow, and orange. It's kind of hard to pick them out because we see so much color everywhere. But early on, he did want to have a profusion and confusion amount of flowers. And here at Casa del Sol, our color scheme is crimson and deep yellow. So we actually see that with these taller blooms in the center of the hedges. That's where we get the Italian Renaissance feel, is that within the hedges, there's beds of flowers. And they might not have that in the Spanish garden. They might just have the interior of the hedge empty. Maybe not so much color and so many blooms. And then we also have the yellow down here. And there was meant to be something that was in bloom all year round. Climbing roses, camellias, citrus. Actually, back then, the beds were changed 3 or 4 times a year. So we come back to the esplanade. And the esplanade was one of the first elements of the hilltop, of the Enchanted Hill, that was worked into the design layout. It's meant to tie everything together. It facilitates movement of people through the grounds and the buildings. So visually and psychologically, it's going to bring everything together. Plus, the cottages, they lack a dining room and a kitchen. So they have bedrooms and bathrooms and sitting rooms. And then all of Hearst and his guests. They were meant, and his family and friends, whoever was staying here, because he always had gatherings. Oftentimes when he was here at this house, he had several estates, but oftentimes when he had gatherings, then everyone would be coming to the main house for their meal, and they're taking the little pathways through the gardens and the blooms, and they're getting on the esplanade and taking this. The esplanade also wraps around the hilltop full circle, a quarter mile. So of course, none of this could have been done without the help of some of the gardeners. And I just wanted to feature these three. We do have images of them, so I thought it would be helpful to show the people we have images of. And we see that Nigel Keep is standing with William Randolph Hearst. They're actually at the pool. He was the orchardist, the tree planter, and the main gardener he was the main gardener from World War II on to 1947, which is around the time that William Randolph Hearst would leave the hilltop going down to Beverly Hills, spending a few more years before he passes away at the age of 88 in 1951. The person that would end up taking over was Norman Rotanzi. And he actually worked here till 1992 until his death. So I actually have many colleagues that have worked with Norman Rotanzi, which makes the history of Hearst Castle even more interesting, because it wasn't that far in the past that the people who created this place and experienced it in its heyday, and when William Randolph Hearst was alive, those people haven't been gone for too long. In the center, we have Isabella Warren. She was a floral designer from 1926 into 32, and her job was to supervise the head gardener and provide seasonal planting plans for the bedding plants. And she would come down to San Simeon for a day or two, a few times a year, and she would consult with Hearst. In a telegram to Julia Morgan, William Randolph Hearst would write, I had a fine flower fest with Miss Warren. It's much too satisfactory when she stays, it's much more satisfactory. I'm sorry. It's much more satisfactory when she stays longer, because she gets more good ideas, and they are surely good too. So she was integral in helping to pick out the types of flowers that would be planted here. And we also have many caretakers of the garden today. People like my friend Kaylee. Hi, Kaylee. Hey, good. I'm going to turn off my Bluetooth, and Margaret, if you can just help us test that we can hear Kaylee.
All right, Margaret, how are we doing on sound?
Yeah, it's a little faint. You might need to get closer.
Okay, Kaylee, we're gonna get closer.
Get my good angle, would you?
Hi, Kaylee.
Okay, there we go. We got you now. Hi.
Hi, how's
Thank
it going?
So
So happy to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you as well.
We have SLO County Library folks.
Oh, great.
Just, you know, our neighbors are watching. Kaylee, how long have you worked here for?
I've been up here on the grounds department for almost 11 years, and I've been a full-time groundskeeper for the last 10 years.
That's amazing. How many other landscapers or gardeners, groundskeepers do you have?
We have one head groundskeeper who's our supervisor, and then we have 2 landscape techs. There's 3, just like me, groundskeepers, and then we have 3 to 2 parkade seasonals that help out, and they're here 2 to 3 times a week.
And are we keeping in line with the color schemes? Do we usually keep in line with the color schemes of the cottages? I was talking to them how House of the Mountain had orange and yellow and blue, and this house that we're standing next to, House of the Sun, has the deep crimson and the yellow.
Yes, yeah, so we keep to it. We stay historic. Yeah, everything that we do up there, we go back to how they did it back in the Hearst time. We could replicate exactly how it was, 2 period, to give everyone the experience that the guests at that time had. They can see it exactly the same as the guests back in the 1930s through the 40s would. So we go back to the 1930s. When we're trying to redo something, we'll look at that era from pictures, and that's how we redo it to those pictures, to the documentation that we have of that specific bed.
Or do we have any modern methods?
Some of the things that we changed around here, we probably do a lot more composting than we used to, which is great. The watering, we've really had to adjust, especially due to the water shortages that we've had. Where this week we're getting our first smart meter, which is really high tech. It monitors the weather for the day, and then also monitor how much moisture is in the ground. And then you have the plant, and then it'll output how much water should go out for that plant with that moisture and the temperature for the day. So that'll really help, as well as we also switched from pop-ups to all drip irrigation up here, which we finally finished that project about a year ago, and that saves just a lot of water, probably about 15,000 gallons a day at least.
Do you have a favorite flower or plant?
Probably my favorite plants up here are probably the fuchsias. We have a big variety of the different fuchsias, and they're really amazing, and the hummingbirds love them. So if you like to see the hummingbirds, they're a good place to hang out is around the fuchsias.
And those are more on the side of the castle, right? They're still on the esplanade, but on the
there's
side.
a few kind of over the side. They kind of like more shaded areas, so they aren't directly in the sun. So you'll find them kind of more in the shady area, more towards the north-facing side.
Do you have any favorite roses?
Yeah, the General MacArthur's are by far my favorite. They're the most fragrant up here. They're really pretty pink, and then like a hot pink. In summertime, they kind of fade to kind of brighter white.
I had everyone virtually smell actually the General MacArthur's just a moment ago, because they're one of my favorites too.
And the fragrance is amazing. On a warm day like this, from 10 feet away, you can smell it before you walk up. It's unbelievable. That's one great thing about the variety of roses that we have. They're all to period, so they're grafted from the roses that were originally here. So they all still have the fragrance, because the majority of the roses these days, the fragrance has been bred out of them. So you get the full experience of the smell as well.
Can I see if the audience has any questions?
Yeah, do you have any questions?
Margaret, are there any questions for Kaylee, or have you seen any in the chat?
I haven't seen any yet, except that they're really excited about being able to be with you guys through Zoom, and people are excited about the book. I have a question for you that is probably kind of basic, so forgive me. You said you used the photographs of the house to figure out what the plants were, but most of the photographs were black and white, correct? So did they have maps of what plants were where, or what types of roses, for example, would be in each location?
Yes, yeah. So they're all mapped as far as what plants were there, like you said, what roses in that particular area. So we go to that, and then we also made a thing called the Olmsted Act, which we went through to every single bed, and we documented every plant, every rose, every species in there. And when one dies, we have to document and replace the exact same rose in the exact same place that we took it out.
Wow.
And as far as the color goes, they have the plants, the names of them, so you can just look it up. You get the plant color from that as well.
And another way we know is that Julia Morgan and Mr. Hearst wrote so many letters to each other. If they were situated in the same town or city and they were able to just visit each other at their office, then we might not have so much documentation through letters and telegrams. But because of those preserved items, we can read that he said things like, I want a profusion and confusion of flowers. And he talks about the color schemes at each one of the cottages. And that's also another form of documentation that we use to understand what the gardens were like in their day.
I see. Do you guys have your own greenhouse, just growing the hybrids of plants for Hearst Castle?
We do have a greenhouse. It is a historic one that we have. We remodeled about 5 years ago, but no, we order all of the annuals that come in and the roses. We have someone that grafts them for us.
We used to, though,
yes,
I believe, because there were 5 greenhouses, and they would grow a lot of the annuals in there, wouldn't they?
Yeah, historically, back in the day, they did. They had much more groundkeepers than we do now. If we had maybe 15 more groundskeepers, we'd probably go back to doing that again, but I hope we do something.
Yeah, Norman Rotanzi, who worked till 1992, from the 30s until the 90s, he talked about, he remembers during many of the years, over 500,000 annuals, bulbs, and perennials were set out to provide the color, and a lot of them grown in the greenhouses. There was one of the greenhouses was devoted to orchids and other tropical plants.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I'll show you all pretty soon here on a slide where the greenhouses are and work.
Okay. I have a few more questions. Is there a place where all the extra plants are kept?
Yeah, we have a lath house. It's down off the side, and we keep them in the shade down there. And the annuals, we'll do that. And then the bus turnaround, we have a bunch of palms that we have down there to replace if we need to replace palms up here as well.
I'm going to show that image. What did you call it? Where they're kept? Is that in that like green?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lath house is what we call it.
Lath house. So that would be about right over here.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of the plants are kept. We also have here's the 5 greenhouses down in that corner.
Oh, wow.
And there's 2 left, and those were renovated or remodeled.
Yeah.
Historically, of course.
Do you have any particular pest problems that kill the plants, like gophers?
Yeah, we have gophers. We definitely deal with those. We deal with mites with the roses, aphids as well. We try to do everything organic up here, and we spray with we try to use neem oil, which is an oil, and it just kind of smothers them, and it's less toxic to the other plants around the other animals that may eat them.
Or if you're like me, you go up to a rose one day. I think we just had maybe a peak of mites. I smelled a rose and inhaled so many mites. It was rather disgusting.
That's horrible.
We have the Dibrotica as well. They're the little green ladybugs with the black spots on them.
Uh-huh.
And those, they'll get like these in front of us here. We're looking at some trumpet plants here, and they love the leaves on them. So we definitely have to keep an eye on those.
We'll zoom in on the trumpet plant.
Oh, the ladybugs eat the trumpet plants?
Yeah, the green ones. The Dibrotica is called the green one. Yeah.
But the trumpet plant is pretty poisonous
Yes,
to
they're
other like humans and mammals.
Yeah, they're extremely poisonous plant. Yeah.
Okay, a few more questions. Are there any succulents planted on the grounds?
Yes, I actually just redesigned the succulent garden with our downtime, and that's down off the side down below us here. And yeah, that was a fun project.
That's in front of and in between the 2 cottages named House of the Sea and House of the Sun. Is it because it's the hottest there? Is that why our Arizona garden is over there?
Yeah.
And how many groundskeepers are there now?
There's 3 of us. There's 2 other besides me that are full-time, and then we have 2 landscape techs, 1 supervisor, and then 2 to 3 seasonal. So
Okay.
all there's 9 to 10 on our crew throughout the week.
But they used to have like 18 to 20 groundskeepers. Is that what you're saying?
About a dozen or so.
Okay.
You say?
When I started, we had 16 on my crew,
Okay.
and that
Oh, wow.
was 11 years ago.
Okay.
Back in Hearst time, I think they had up to 30 to 40 at a time.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's see. Lots of questions coming in.
Great.
Okay, I think I got through. Oh, do you have any native plants that other than the live oaks that were planted there?
The live oaks, we have those. I look around, not too many that I can think of off the top of my head. Most of them are not native plants up here. We have some ceanothus up here. We have some poison oak that pops up every while.
Since we are in a Mediterranean climate and keeping with the theme of kind of this Mediterranean revival or even Italian Renaissance, we do have a lot of plants that are grown in the Mediterranean, either native or brought to places like Spain, which is on the Mediterranean, by the Moors who came from Persia there.
Sure. Okay. And Michelle Turner says, hi, Tracy.
Michelle used to be a guide here. We miss you.
Okay, are you still, oops, sorry, my email popped up over that one. Are you still planting dahlias?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we still plant the dahlias. Yeah,
Is that more of a winter time, a cold weather plant?
the dahlias, yeah, they come in when it's a little bit
Is
cooler out.
there towards the back of the estimate?
Or they'll pop up. The dahlias, they'll be up in towards the end of summer. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
okay.
Bee house, we have some. Yeah, they kind of wrap around the backside over there.
Yeah, I'm not the pro. I actually had to look up a dahlia while I was prepping for my garden tour. And all.
And we had some really neat ones. We have the dinner plates up here that are, they're about the size of a dinner plate. They're pretty
Wow.
impressive.
Wow. And those
One
are
of my
the,
favorite, one of my favorite ones. We have one that looks like a candy cane. It's white with little reddish pink speckles in it. It's
Wow.
really neat.
okay. Any more questions from the audience?
I got just a few more things to show you before we call it
Okay.
quits.
I
Hang in.
think all the questions are done. So thank you
Okay.
so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. Appreciate you joining me today.
Anytime.
All right.
Nice meeting y'all. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Stay hydrated. I'm gonna go ahead and put my Bluetooth on again because we have tours happening all around and it's better that way. Okay, Margaret, is it okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, great. All right, well, we're going to continue down the Esplanade. It's that tie-in from the cottages to the main house, Casa del Mar, house to the sea in front of us. If you were to take this path, which is a cobblestone path, which is a little bit more, it's a throwback to that informal part of the garden when it was more of a Spanish style, less of the blooms, more palms, citrus, boxwood hedges, you would make your way down that way. Like I was mentioning, within the gardens, there are harmonious whole, but there's these components where you can just stop and you can view it as almost a side piece or an additional piece. When you see the two benches on either side of the Roman sarcophagus with the three graces, and those are all here in front of Casa del Mar, house of the sea. And of course that you could see the symmetry here. Another characteristic of our gardens. The colorful tiles, they're even though they did the change from the Spanish gardens to Italian Renaissance, they're still seen. And a lot of them are designed by Julia Morgan. Colorful tiles date back to Spain and the Moors bringing those oftentimes in geometric patterns, but then they evolved to include animals. One of my favorite parts, I think the tiles are also a crowd pleaser and kid pleaser when kids come. We have bunny rabbits and different designs, designs of castles. So these are glazed polychrome earthenware tiles. They're done in a Spanish Cuenca style, which means that the picture and the designs all have raised edges. And those raised edges have a purpose and a function. They separate the colored glazes, right? So you can't color outside of the lines with the Cuenca style because you have the raised edges keeping the glaze within. These were done in the 1920s and 30s. Yes, we've had to remake them and we tried to do it as close as possible. We've made them on the hill before where we've had people in historic restoration that can replicate the design and the color. But originally they were done in Berkeley at the California Faience Company. So let's get a bit of a closer look here. Now we've seen the drawings by Julia Morgan. So let's get a little closer look. There There's our bunny. And many of the stairs that connect the terraces and the walkways and the esplanade do have these tile risers. So we have the castle. And then even, see if I can steady this. There is this kind of traditional Southern Spanish triangle design that kind of looks like a pyramid, and some lotus flowers that go up on either side of Sekhmet. Here's just another example how we're taking a variation of the theme of symmetry, statuary, Roman fragments like columns. This statuary is not a copy of ancient Greek or Rome. It's an authentic 3,000 plus year old Egyptian goddess named Sekhmet. All tying in to the main house. So I did show you our aerial shot a little early. I'll bring it back one more time. Letters from William Randolph Hearst to Julia Morgan early on in the construction process, because they built and planned for almost 30 years, never finishing. In fact, I think that when we get the cottages built, we can lay out a plan of walks and flower beds or landscape features of some kind that will bring all of the structures together in a harmonious whole. And even though they never completed the estate, I think they met their goal of bringing what they did do so much all together in a harmonious whole. So we have a few minutes for questions if anyone wanted to add some questions to the chat.
We do have some more questions.
Great.
Is there any connection between the Huntington Garden and Hearst in garden planning?
Not that I know of. There's no obvious connection. But there doesn't mean that there couldn't be some sort of minor connection. You can connect Hearst Castle to just about any place on this earth, it feels like. But yeah, nothing that I can think of.
And then somebody had just mentioned Monterey cypress as a local or a native plant. So that was from an earlier, comment, I think. Yeah, are there any more questions from people? I just want to give one more reminder about the free copies of the Julia Morgan book. And I'm going to put my email in the chat because some people were emailing, I guess, the wrong reply. Another question that came up, it says, on the wide pick, on your wide pick, what is the circular building on the right?
All right, I'm going to quickly go back to it. Here we go.
Far right.
This is part of the zoo enclosure in the upper right. I imagine might be the circular building that's being referred to. So there was a zoo with, it was a little under 100 species of wild animals. I'm not sure exactly what animal was back there. It could maybe have been the elephants in that area. But there were polar bear enclosures that were built along the road when you're going back down the hill. Also, when you're going back down the hill, there's a pergola, a mile-long pergola. There were fruit trees and wine grapes grapevines that were grown there. This is where some of the staff lived. There was a construction camp and there was employee housing. So that wasn't too far from the greenhouses, and the greenhouses are at the very lower bottom with the white roofs. And Hearst thought that the esplanade, that walking pathway, enclosed the castle very nicely, and it actually goes all the way around like this. So that the esplanade was just like the true walking path, and all the little cottages and all the little pathways connected to it. And it all, like all roads leading to Rome, all roads led to Casa Grande, the main house.
How much of
Whether
their
you-
gardening was about fire abatement? Were they concerned about fire?
Let's see here. I mean, we're always concerned about fire. That would be a good question for Kaylee. We do trim some of the tall grasses around the hill, but I'm not sure what other types of steps that we take.
Mm.
The closest a fire came was several years ago, 2016 maybe, because it was before I worked here, and it came just over the ridge line. But it was still a couple miles away.
Mm. Okay, I think we are out of time. Is there any
All right.
last questions before we wrap it up? Oh, the best time of year to see the gardens.
Let's see. They always had something in bloom. So even if you come here in the winter, you might see the oranges on the tree or the camellias on the bushes. I think late spring is a pretty good time before it gets really warm. A lot of the new annuals are in, the roses are in bloom. So this has just been kind of late spring, early summer has been one of my favorite times when everything just seems to be going. All year around, the lantana is in bloom. So there's always something in bloom here. Late spring is also nice because it's before the summer. We are really busy in the summer. School's out, people are on vacation. It can get really busy here. So if you really want that experience, like it was when Hearst was here and his guests were here, his famous guests, you might want to come at a time like midweek when school's in session. That's my suggestion before it heats up.
Oh, that's a good point. So we've got some thank yous. This was fascinating. Thank you for putting this together for us, Tracy. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we're so glad
Yeah,
everybody
thank you
could
for
join
joining
us.
me. Yeah, this is also broadcast through a program we have at the castle called the Ports Program. It's actually a statewide program with virtual tours. Most of our audience is K through 12, but we do provide access to students and teachers. If you want to check our Facebook page, if we have any educators or teachers out there, or you know someone who has a classroom and you want and they want to do a virtual tour of Hearst Castle and it's curriculum supported, you could check our Facebook page and we'll be updating you when the calendar will reopen for the fall.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great summer.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.